will kick off the afternoon with a panel of experts discussing the impact data science on supply chain management and operations. Please welcome our panel moderator, Tim Judge, President and CEO at Agillitics, and joined by Breya Mcglown, Data Scientist at Fedex, Francis Boykin, Principal Advanced Analytics Manager at at&t, Hua Ai, PhD, Manager of Data Science at Delta, Isaac Usabute Aguadije, Network Equipment Forecasting and Business Analytics at at&t, Pradipta Saha, Head of Data and Analytics Global Supply Chain and Asia, Middle East, Africa at Mondelez International. Please welcome our esteemed panel of supply chain analytics experts.
Thank you, Data Science Connect and Amelia for having us. I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. I'll do most of the talking. I'll let the experts do most of the talking. It may say in your program that this is for marketing. It's actually for supply chain. So part of our challenge today is to ensure supply chain is seen as sexy as marketing, and I think we could do it. We got the red carpet. We're ready to go. So I'd like to first just kind of go around with the panel. If you guys take a moment, just discuss a little bit about your role and high level on some of the projects that you're currently working on to kind of level set with the audience would be awesome. So Hua, if you want to start.
Hi everyone, my name is Hua. I am manager of data science in the Ops Decision Science team. So as the name says it, we are a decision science team, support the operational divisions. If you see the airline, and by the way, I assume everyone knows by airline, that only means Delta. Since the context is Atlanta. So the airline has two big arms. One's on the commercial side, they deal with complex problems like revenue management, inventory control, marketing, etc. And on the operations side, our job is simply execute the flight schedule. So we depart on time, we arrive on time, and that's it. As you can probably tell, sometimes they are, which we call irregular operations. If there's a thunderstorm pop up on the Atlanta field, the departure rate for the Hartfield-Jackson will lower, and we'll have to make a decision. What do we do? Do we cancel flights? Do we delay flights? What can we do to save the time for our customers and also for the operations? So that's about what we do, and looking forward to discuss more with the panel and the audience here.
Thank you. Hi, Breya McGowan, a data scientist advisor at Fedex World Headquarters located in Memphis, Tennessee, so I flew in for you guys. Let's see. I am strictly focused on enhancing customer experience. So as you could probably imagine, FedEx is a huge company, right? We have multiple departments, and I am in the customer experience department. And so a lot of the projects that I'm working on revolve around increasing that experience for small businesses, shippers, recipients, and things like that. So let's see. So some projects related to tracking packages, customer segmentation, and voice of customers are several of the myriad of things that I'm working on right now. But ultimately, the goal is to enhance the customer experience. So I can give a lot of insight related to that because I'm not technically on the operations side, like Hua or Isaac, but what I do impacts operations ultimately because the customer will ultimately define what is quality, and whatever they say they want, we have to give it to them.
Thanks. Pradipta Saha, I work for Mondelez International. Some of you may not be familiar with the name of the company, but I do earnestly hope you know our brands like Oreo and Ritz and all the good stuff, right? And if you're from Europe or Asia, Cadbury. We have Cadbury here too, but that's not owned by us, it's owned by Hershey, different story. Yeah. My job is simple. I mean, Mondelez operates in pretty much every country in the world except those where we are not allowed to, being a US company. like North Korea, etc. And my job is simply about, ultimately really about making sure that we keep the cost of your favorite cookies and favorite snacks and chocolate, as low as possible, sustainable. And we also make sure that I was in my daughter's third grade class last year giving a career day talk, and I thought I'll talk to them about how do you manage inventory. And these kids were really worried about, when I was talking about allocation and what happens when you run short on inventory. Oh, so if you don't have enough product, how do you make sure that Publix in my neighborhood gets the product? Right? Yeah. So I don't actually do the planning, but yeah, my team creates the tools and the capabilities to use data to be able to make sure that our supply chains keep running at a low enough cost and promise you the availability of product on shelf.
Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Osabate Aguiji, and I'm a senior data analyst for at&t. We actually have 3 supply chains. We have our retail consumer supply chain to support the handsets, phones, accessories, devices. And we have within the network organization a wireless supply chain for cell site equipment, 5G, LTE, you hear that in the news quite a bit. And then we have our wireline supply chain for fiber, copper. And so I support the network side with advanced analytics, looking at how we can increase forecast accuracy, looking at our key metrics as far as on-time delivery, and just supplementing our capabilities with data.
Thanks, guys. That's awesome. So as you can see, we have such a diverse panel in different roles, different industries. So I think this is going to be a great discussion. So why don't we start it off? I wanted to mention we'll leave the last 10 minutes for some Q&A. So definitely think about some questions you'd love to ask the panel while we have them, and we'll leave a few minutes for that. And being in a consultancy, we see companies, fairly consistent set of challenges for data science projects, and specifically around big supply chain projects, because supply chain will bring a large amount of disparate data and unique challenges that are fairly complex. So we are seeing a lot of companies move, to or at least some of their data science expertise towards supply chain focused projects. And these challenges could be anything from messy and missing data to lack of the right talent, retaining the right talent, organizational structure and alignment challenges. But I would love to hear from some of the panel on some of the challenges that they see and how they best mitigate those challenges and overcome them. So, Hua, you want to start? Go down again.
Challenges, okay. So our customers expect us to know everything. They know we have big data. They want us to know exactly where their flights are, when it's going to depart, and where their baggage are and everything. They assume we're one team, which is a good assumption. It is one team operation. But there's so many different divisions handling different parts of the entire user experience. So in the back end, it's actually pretty challenging for us to sync up on all the data points about the customer for us to know exactly when the customer set up to an agent to ask a question, what has the customer's travel experience so far, and what the customer cares most about, and how should we address his or her question. Ever since I worked for Delta, I've got asked multiple times by my friends, when will my flight depart, right? We can track our pizza being made. If you order on Uber Eats, you know exactly the down is in the kitchen and when they start making a pizza, when it's on the delivery driver, and when it will arrive by your door. So Delta, why can't you tell me exactly? I know it's late. I get that. There's a thunderstorm. I'm not blaming you guys, but why can't you tell me exactly how late it's going to be? I think the simplest answer I can put is because we're trying to not take the delay as it happens. we're showing that we're 30 minutes behind schedule. There are hundreds of people behind sea trying to save the operation by swapping aircrafts. Like if my inbound aircraft is late, can I grab another aircraft on the ground to serve this flight so I don't have to take the delay? Can I rotate another crew member? My pilot in inbound is late. Can I find another pilot to execute the flight? So we have a business unit called Operations Customer Center. So there are hundreds of people on the floor trying to make these operation decisions on the fly to save the delays that are incurring into the system. And as we all know, they are more conservative operators, they are more optimistic operators, and they may vary in how much delay they think the flights are going to take. So a big challenge for us is how do we stitch all the data points together, all we know about our customer and about our operations, and then use a system to build up a decision-making tool that can help the operators to have more standardized assessment of how the new flight schedule is going to be. So we use optimization, we use simulation, we use predictive machine learning, all of those technologies trying to solve that challenge.
Thanks.
So I would say one major challenge that we personally face, because we have multiple projects running at the same time across opcos, is alignment. You have to make sure that all of your stakeholders are aligned, because if they are not, you will not meet your project deadlines, and then that ultimately impacts the customer. So if you have some expectation of delivering a new interface for a customer, or we're trying to pilot something, and there's confusion across multiple opcos of who's supposed to do what, how the project is supposed to be executed, and just setting expectations. If those things are not set in stone, you will find that you will waste a lot of resources as far as your time, the other team members' time, and things like that. And so one way to mitigate that is project management. I mean, I know that seems pretty obvious, but it definitely comes into play when you're working in a large corporation like FedEx, right? Because you have FedEx services, you have express, you have freight, you have ground, and then you have other international companies that we work with. And so you could imagine all of the data science teams across opcos, and you have multiple executives across those opcos. So one challenge is always alignment, but I think just having a solid project management or just a project manager on your team will help. And just being efficient and effective with allocating your resources as far as on your team per se. And I guess that's really it. That's the biggest challenge that I've faced personally. Yeah, that's a huge one. And it takes a lot of time. You can spend 2 to 3, maybe even half a year just aligning across opcos and just individuals within such a large corporation. And then you have to think about getting data and having access to data that you're not necessarily supposed to have access to, only because everything is separated out into silos. So you have to be mindful of what the end goal is, what the expectations are, and you have to plan accordingly, because if you don't, you will waste a lot of your time, unfortunately.
Well said.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with that. I think what I would add is, even more than alignment, what are you aligning on? Go a bit further upstream, because not just. I mean, I've heard this from so many companies that it all starts with the question: what is our data science strategy? And the answer soon becomes, let's hire some data scientists, smart people. It's not going to solve your problem, right? Because what it leads to is the data scientists quickly get bored because they end up creating dashboards right? The skills they use are Tableau and Alteryx, which are, again, I mean, those are important skills, but that's not what you hired them for. So yeah, they either end up leaving or doing things that you don't need to pay them that much for, right? So I think, and part of the problem is obviously that, I mean, ideally to be data science should be kept under the hood, right? I mean, it's not the business's, shouldn't be the business's problem as to whether we use data science or AI or whatever other technique or technology. The focus should be on what problems are you solving. And to your point, right? Yes, there are going to be hundreds of groups in a large company which all are doing something data science-ish, right? And let them do it, because a problem in a small market is still a big problem for that market. And that market's general manager has to earn a profit, right? But can you identify those 5 or 10 problems which, if solved, can create fundamental changes, beneficial changes to the company, and focus your core data science group on that? Don't even call them data science group. Call them whatever, problem-solving group, right? WPS, Wicked Problem Solvers, right? Something like that, right? Just a new acronym. And then, I think the second part of this related to me is there's too much to me of focus on trying to find sexy problems to solve. I think it's much more important to have sexy solutions to the same old problems. In a supply chain, how do I forecast demand better, right? As I said, how do I get the product to you at an even lower cost? These are age-old problems. They don't change. Until the day you have 3D printers in your houses printing Oreo for you. We'll get there. We're trying something like that in one of our plants to make chocolate. Yeah, until then, supply chains will remain physical. We'll have the same old problems. And the good thing is now you have lots of data which has a pattern behind it, right? You're not trying to solve, do random predictions like when will the Delta plane finally take off? Sorry, right? I mean, there is something, there is a science to it. It's not completely random, so you can predict it, right? And you have data, which is a big assumption, but yes, typically you do have data. So go after those problems. And if you do that, then this whole question of, do we have alignment? Are our data scientists happy? Are they working on challenging stuff which makes a difference? They just go away. And I've seen successful companies and teams within a company, the ones who take this approach tend to have much more positive impact on the business versus those which hire very smart people and then end up having them build dashboards.
Thanks, Pradipta.
So similar to the alignment that you mentioned earlier in the data science question, as far as what is the data science strategy, I would say that's been one of our biggest challenges because we work in planning, so demand planning, supply planning, and if many of you work in that area, you know that the foundation and the fundamental elements of any planning system is data science. So we've had a lot of challenges, or we've had some healthy skepticism, I'd say, with what is data science? We have data science. We have this planning engine that has these 30 different algorithms that does all this linear regression and all these heuristics. So how can you add value and bring value? And one of the things that we did was just focus on just some small, quick wins. I think one of the presenters mentioned it earlier. You have to provide some small, quick wins. You can't be on a project for 5-6 months and people are like, hey, did the ML work? Is the model ready? There were a number of challenging analyses that we've had throughout our tenure at our organization where big data and data science was just the right solution, and just finding the right tool, have the right problem statement, have it fully and clearly defined, and get some quick wins.
That's a really important point, Isaac, and thanks for sharing. And that actually brings up another good point, and this is probably the right crowd, right? Is I get asked all the time to solve supply chain problems, but the conversation starts with, "Hey, we need AI. We're gonna solve. We need AI in the cloud, and it's gonna be digital, and we're gonna solve it, and that's what we're gonna do." And the first question should be, what business problem are we trying to solve, and do we, what's the right technology to do so? But there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of noise in the market with any new and evolving technologies. Maybe we can go around and just talk about some common misconceptions you think, either internally or externally, people may have around data science, AI, machine learning. Maybe continue with you, Isaac.
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of my last comment, we've had a lot of debate and discussion about, well, what is data science and what is BI? And we've done a lot of education of like, well, that's BI, that's not data science. And Frances, who I had to fill in for her, who couldn't make it today, but I think she may join, she coined a term that I'm leveraging, so it's not my original thought, but if you already know it, it's not data science. Right, and we have a lot of folks that have a misconception of what really big data, data science, and BI and reporting are. And so we've gone and had endless conversations and discussions around how can we take advantage of data science, how can we take advantage of our data environments. We have so much data. I mean, in fact, some people feel that if you have 100,000 rows of data, that's big data, right? And really educate. We have Hadoop clusters. I mean, surprisingly, we have folks that really feel that way. And so really just trying to explain what big data really means. You can have big data that's structured. I mean, we have countless databases. We have hundreds of millions of rows of data, and it's a lot of data. If you try to query that data, you know, if it's not optimal and it's not efficient, then you can really bring servers down and you get a knock on your door by the DBA team that we're going to kill this job, right? So that's one of the things that's been really critical.
Pradipta?
Yeah, I think what I'll add to that is, I've worked largely in the supply chain space and in this area when it was not even called data science. One fundamental challenge or misconception I see is that, I'll put it this way, a lot of data scientists that I either work with or interview are heavily biased towards what I would call, for want of a better term, the statistics part of data science. You know, they're all about predicting things using, boring things like regression and more exciting stuff like, the neural networks, right? But it's still about ultimately statistically driven models. In the supply chain world, there's a huge scope for operations research, right? And they tend to not have any familiarity with the world of OR, right? And it's often, and when they do, it's like, oh, but it's 1960s stuff, right? Oh, so is statistics, right? It's just that you call it data science now. I think the opportunity we are missing is really, you need to, in the supply chain, there's huge potential in combining both. There are a few companies that I'm aware of that are actually doing this. They're going to combine machine learning with OR in the whole, inventory planning problem, right? Including if you're a supply chain person, you must have played the beer game, not the real one, the theoretical one, right? So I've seen reinforcement learning applied to the beer game to create a model, and there's huge opportunity there because now you're combining the best of. Most of these OR-driven algorithms, their opportunity or their weakness is the fact that they often depend on parameters, which are anybody's guess, right? But what data science, the statistics part of it now allows you to do, machine learning, is to learn these parameters. So put them together, wow, you have magic, right? But again, because of the separation in the theoretical expertise, we don't see a lot of this happening.
Makes sense. Breya?
One huge misconception that I believe that I experience on a weekly basis, and I'm pretty sure most of you do, is that you can do everything. They expect us to be wizards. And so what I mean by that is people have ideas of what they would like for us to do, related to, I have this really cool idea, can we make this happen? No, no, we can't. And so I think just a part of my role as an advisor is to let individuals know in my organization and across OpCos, let them know what is feasible and what we can do in the short increments of time that we have available. So 2-week sprints, and then you have PI planning sessions and things like that. You have to make sure that those who are not technically involved know what is truly feasible. Because I have people, it's crazy, like grandiose ideas of, I have this really cool idea. I want us to predict who the people are when they come in before they log on to the website and things like that. And we can't really do that right now. That would be nice, but let's bring it back in and let me advise you on what is possible today. We can set long-term goals, but today, let's take this quick win and build upon those expectations that you have. So ultimately, just all in all, the challenge that I face on a day-to-day, weekly basis is just level setting with people and letting them know what is truly feasible from my end, from my team members' end, and across the opcos that I operate with.
Very good point. Actually, I'm going to piggyback behind your point and say, yeah, set expectations with our business partners are really important. I have a fun example. So a colleague from our technical operations reached out and say, I heard you're a data scientist. So do you know natural language processing? I said, yes. And he said, I had a great project for you. So whenever we bring an aircraft into a check, we have a log file generated. And then we have specialists that code these log files into this code, and then we analyze these codes for our reliability purposes. Can you train a machine learning model to automatically classify these log files? I was like, oh, that sounds a standard document classification project. Let me take a look. And I soon found out they have 1,000 or over 1,000 code that they would like me to classify. And they need 99% accuracy because this is reliability program. We're heavily regulated industry. We need to provide some of the code to FAA for them to audit, and this is safety. So how do we, so the project seems to come to a dead end. I'm not sure whether I'm not a good enough data scientist, but not sure there are technologies out there to classify 1,000 code with 99% accuracy on every single time. But after talking to the specialists, talking to the business unit, understand their process, we kind of pivoted the project to train a model to be really confident at the code it produces. So my model won't be able to code each document accurately, but for the ones that I have confidence on, it is over 99% accuracy. And we were able to achieve that for around 37% of the log files. So it's not a complete solution. We still need to have human read the rest of the log files, 63% of those, but at least it cut off some of their workload. And by coupling the current machine learning method, understand what technology can achieve, and try to pair the human process around that. I think that's a way to kind of solve the business problems given the technology limitations that we have today.
If I just jump in to add to both your points, especially yours, Breya. You know, when I interview data scientists, and they tell me that they responded, they built this model and that model, and they got, these results. I asked them, where did the question come from? Oh, we had a business partner who had this question or this need, and we built this fantastic model. Good for you, but I would rather hire somebody who can tell me that they thought of a question themselves. Because of having spent time in that business, they had figured out that, hey, here's how we could use data science to, as I said, get a 6-year solution to the same old problem, right? And vice versa, what a lot of companies are doing, including ours right now, is making data science less of a mystery, right? There's a company which I will not name because they're our competition. They are actually on a mission, they've been on a mission to train every single employee on data science, which doesn't mean that they're going to down-develop models. These people might be shop floor technicians, right? Machine operators. They may not even have the math to be able to write a program. But what they're being trained on is how to think data science, right? So that two things happen. One is you identify those unsexy problems for which a data scientist can come up with sexy solutions, right? Because sitting in my headquarters in Deerfield, Illinois, there is no way on earth I can really know, no matter how much I travel, as to what are those unsexy problems which, if solved, will give my company pretty big boost. Secondly, it avoids the situation you talked about, which is someone coming to you from management and saying, can you give me a model with 99.9% prediction accuracy and deals with this gazillion rows of data, of which most of the features are missing anyway, right? Because people, it's not very difficult if you think about it for someone with a high school education to understand what data science can or cannot do, right? So that does two things. It sort of makes data scientists more business embedded, business, they learn, they get business acumen, and people from the business start to understand what data science can do. And I think that is very, very powerful.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome. So we have I want to leave at least about 10 minutes for questions. We're about 13 minutes. Real quick, we're going to do a rapid fire round since I have you in the chair. And we're going to restrict the answers to one word, right? You have one word answers, right? They don't know I'm doing this. This is completely out of left field, but we have about 3 minutes. So, all right. So I think I know the answer to this first one. But if you have two choices and I ask you, what is the main reason data science projects fail, and your two options are technology and people, what would you say?
People.
Process.
Process. Okay, we'll go process.
And by people, I don't mean the data scientists, people.
That's fair. Another question I get asked all the time is, especially around supply chain, I'm a little biased coming from supply chain, but where should our data science team fit in the organization from a responsibility perspective? So your three options, to keep it simple: operations, IT, or its own chief data officer area, if you're starting your own company tomorrow.
Agnostic.
Hybrid
Which is hybrid.
Yeah, which is hybrid.
operations and
Yep. And you said operations too?
To pick one, it would be operations.
Okay.
I said only one. So
Yeah, that's true. I did restrict it. Yep.
I picked one.
I gotta
Cool.
change the rules.
No, absolutely. Well, I think that's about, and we'll leave some time for 2 or 3 questions. I think there should be mics going around, or. I'll play a dual role.
Thanks. Is this thing on? Hey, yeah, thank y'all for being on the panel. I'd just love to hear some success stories, honestly. I'd like to know where in particular you've found that you were able to use data science and maybe machine learning or whatever modeling you're doing to outperform a person that might be like some sort of supply chain genius.
Yeah, I can share one very recent example. This relates to countries like India, where 80% of the business is sold through mom and pop, what in the US we'd call mom and pop stores, right? So we have salespeople visiting 40, 50 of these stores within an 8-hour shift, and these salespeople are typically high school grads or high school dropouts, right? And they have a few minutes in which to convince this storekeeper, the physical storekeeper who is spending his own money and can probably afford to buy not even a case of Oreo, maybe 3 packets of Oreo. You got to buy this, right? So recently we used Netflix type of model where you think of the stores as movies, right? And the SKUs as movies and the stores as people, right? And essentially, when the salesperson walks in, he pulls out their smartphone and the machine learning algorithm, which has used internal sales data and data around, just like Netflix would do, right? Say, yeah, these are the movies that you need to watch. These are the SKUs, the products that you need to buy. And yeah, we saw a pretty good uplift from that in a test market, and we've rapidly been scaling it up, and would be taking it now beyond India to other similar countries like Morocco and Indonesia, etc. Measurable success.
So I don't necessarily have a model per se, but there was a very challenging project and challenge that we've had within our organization, which is understanding some item relationships, correlations, and dependencies. And you would think it's pretty trivial, but when you have, a pretty robust item catalog, and you can have internal sales orders worth anywhere from 1 to 200 unique items, the number of combinations get pretty extreme. And so one of the things that we've always wanted to understand is looking at those relationships. If I can see item A, for example, is in 200 different combinations, I can understand if we have a backorder or a shortage with item A, what the true implications are across all of our internal sales orders. And so we started using some market basket analysis in a pretty creative way to understand those implications. And so we've started to kind of reimagine some of our KPIs and metrics using that analysis, like you were saying, repeatable, sexy type of analyses to reimagine, well, let's look at supply availability. Because generally speaking, supply availability is looked at an item by item or product family level. Well, what if we start looking at these item combinations or clusters? And so we start looking at on-time delivery. And if we see that, well, what types of trends and patterns do we see with respect to these different items, we can get in front of some of these types of anomalies to kind of manage supply, day stock on hand. In fact, it was kind of born out of a pretty critical project we had where an executive wanted to know, hey, this is a pretty critical piece of equipment, and we want to understand its attachment rate to these ancillary parts because we don't want to stock out of those ancillary parts. We don't want a $5 widget holding up a pretty big implementation. And there were some very obvious relationships, but what was surprising was the non-obvious relationships. And then we start looking at different dimensions geographically, then it was even more striking. And so we were able to say, hey, we need to increase day stock on hand by 40% for these items, keep it level with these, and really mitigate some potential supply risks.
Any other questions? Okay, we're about 2 or 3 minutes early, but if anyone has any more, okay. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate the panel. Great job. And hopefully enjoy the rest of your session.